What is up, everybody? In this video, we are playing 2-5 cash at Resorts World. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps the channel grow. We're trying to get to 10K subscribers. Let's go. In the first hand of the night, we have Pocket Kings, and the hijack raises to $10. The button and the small blind both call, and we 3-bet in the big blind to $60. Everyone makes a call. The flop comes Queen 10 Deuce Rainbow. For pot control and deception, we start with a check, and it checks around. The turn is not so great, it's a 10 of diamonds. Someone could have definitely checked a 10 back on the flop, so once again, we are going to check. This time it checks to the button, who bets $80. For this price, we are not going anywhere, we make the call. The river is the 8 of clubs. Nothing really gets there besides Jack 9, and we check, and when our opponent bets 125, there is no chance we're folding. We quickly make the call, and our opponent announces ace high. We show our hand and are good. Played that one a bit cautiously, but you kinda have to when you are 4 ways. Seems like it made us the most money anyways. In the next hand, we are only 5-handed, and we raise ace 10 of hearts on the button to $20. The small blind makes the call, and the big blind folds. The flop comes ace queen 3 with 2 clubs. The small blind checks, and we bet $25. They make the call. The turn is very nice, the 10 of spades. The small blind checks to us again, and with 2 flush draws on board now, we are going to size up. We bet $100 into about 90. Once again, our opponent makes a call. The river comes the 9 of spades. I was really close between betting for value here or checking back. Our opponent could have definitely backdoored into spades, so we decided to just check back. They show ace jack, so they did have one of the hands we could have definitely gotten value from. But I don't think we see a strong ace just calling in the small blind so often, so I like our check back. In the next hand, we have king deuce of spades on the button. This would obviously be a normal fold, but since we are only 4-handed, we decide to open our range up and raise to $20. The small blind and the big blind both call. The flop comes ace 8 8, 2 spades. When it checks to us, we could certainly bet or check. The small blind and the big blind will both have a lot more 8x than us, and with the nut flush draw, we are just going to want to see the turn for a cheap price. We go ahead and check back. The turn is the queen of spades. We now have the nut flush, and it checks around to us, and we bet $25. The small blind and the big blind both call. The river comes the 7 of diamonds. This time the small blind checks and the big blind leads for $65. This is really weird and not something that I have come across very often. It felt like this person was just trying to buy a cheap showdown with maybe an 8 or a worse flush. For this reason, we decide to raise to $225. The small blind folds, and the big blind actually goes all in for about $630 more.
I was thinking if you jammed, I'd fold, but...
This is such a terrible spot. Our opponent is saying they have 8-7, so they river to full house, or ace 8 or queen 8. As you heard, I was certainly planning on folding if we got jammed on, and I really didn't think our hand was good anymore.
I have a flush. I don't think it's good.
But sometimes you know what the right thing to do is, and you still don't do it, so we ended up making the call. To not much surprise, our opponent shows queen 8 for a full house. The way they played it was kind of weird in my opinion, and not something I expected, but it ended up working out for them greatly. We've all been there where we know we should be folding but end up making the call anyways. This stuff happens, we must have more discipline next time. In the next hand, we have ace 6 of diamonds in the small blind. We are still short at 5-handed. There is an under the gun straddle on for $10, which is equivalent to the hijack. The button just limps the $10, and we raise to $60. Per usual, everyone makes a call. The flop comes ace king 10. We have top pair with a weak kicker and backdoor diamonds. We are 3 ways, and we start with a check. It checks around, and the turn is one of the few cards we did not want to see, the jack of diamonds. It's nice that it is a diamond, as now we have the nut flush draw, but obviously the jack makes it so that any queen is a straight. For this reason, we have to check again, and this time it checks to the button, who bets $70. We call and the hijack folds. The river is the king of hearts. We check again, and this time our opponent bets 125, which is about 1/3. We obviously can't call here, but I will say we definitely had thoughts of bombing. Our opponent is pretty much capped to a queen here, whereas we can have pocket aces, pocket kings, pocket jacks, pocket tens. We can have ace king, even king jack. We have all of the boats. With this said, we do not go for this bluff, as I just didn't think our opponent was tight enough to be able to fold a queen. It's important to recognize whether or not you think a bluff will get through if you try it. This was not one of those cases. So we just fold in defeat. The next hand is the biggest one of the night. We have ace 9 of diamonds on the button. We now have a full table and the low jack limps for $5. The cutoff calls the $5 and we raise to $35. The big blind 3-bets to $65. While this guy was not 3-betting much, this sizing is just terrible and is basically going to get 0 folds from me. We make the call. The flop comes ace queen 9. Before this flop comes, our opponent actually checks in the dark. Not sure what to make of this, but I know we have top and bottom on a pretty draw heavy board, so we are going to bet. We bet 125 into about 140, and our opponent makes the call. The turn is the 3 of spades. This now brings a spade draw on board, and having diamonds, we unblock all of the draws. So when our opponent checks to us, we want to continue betting. With about $400 in the pot, we bet 380. Our opponent asks how much we have left in our stack, and eventually puts us all in. This is for about 525 more. This guy has been running like a god all night. Let's see if he can lose this one to us. We make the call. The river comes the jack of diamonds. Our opponent slowly shows his hand and has ace queen.
That's 2 pair.
Top 2 and top bottom. Wow, what a flop.
Fucking guy doesn't lose.
This guy doesn't lose. He has not lost since I met him today.
We basically get coolered here, 2 pair versus 2 pair for about $1,100. We are now down heaps. Let's see if we can rebuild. Let's start this comeback in the next hand where we pick up pocket aces. We raise under the gun to $20. The low jack and the cutoff and the small blind all call. The flop comes ace 5-3. Besides the flush draw on board, we have top set and just have so much of this board, so we decide to check. It checks around. The turn is the 8 of clubs. Now the big blind actually leads for $50. With 2 flush draws on board and us not having a club or diamond, we decide to raise to 160. It folds back around to the big blind who calls. The river is a brick, let's say deuce offsuit, and it checks to us. Our opponent most likely missed their draw, or they have a value hand like ace X or 2 pair themselves. For this reason, I don't see any point in betting small, so we go for a big sizing. We bet 500 and overbet. If they have a missed draw, then they are going to fold to any kind of bet size anyways. Whereas if they have something of value, we really want to charge them. Unfortunately, this is not the case as they fold. In the next hand, we have ace 10 off. There is a button shadow on for $10. We don't realize it and raise to $20 under the gun. The button shadow calls, the small blind and the big blind also call. The flop comes king, queen, 8 with 2 hearts. We flop a gut shot. If there weren't so many people in this hand, I could definitely bet, but I think we need to start with a check multi-way. We check and it checks around. The turn is the 6 of diamonds. This time, the big blind bets $20 into about 80. We are still drawing to the nuts, and if we hit an ace, that could maybe still be good too, so we make the call. Surprisingly, the button and the small blind call as well. The river is the 7 of hearts. This time, the small blind and the big blind check to us. While risky, it just doesn't feel like anyone has anything here. We do also have a heart, even though I would much rather have the ace of hearts. Nonetheless, we take this opportunity to bet to try to take it down. We bet $100, and fortunately, everyone folds. Always nice to steal a pot multi-way. In the next hand, we have ace queen off and we raise under the gun to $20. The hijack and the button both call. The flop comes king, queen, 5, all hearts. We check and it checks to the button who bets $25. Without a heart here, I could definitely get behind folding, but with middle pair, I think we just want to see another card. We call. The hijack also makes a call. The turn is the 8 of diamonds. This time it checks around. The river appears to be quite decent. The queen of clubs. Our middle pair has improved to trips. We decide to lead for $60 or about half pot. It folds to the button, who is actually the same player who got us earlier with the queen 8 full house versus our nut flush, who ends up jamming for about $250.
Again? Or just like last time? This time easier to fold, I think.
At the time, I assumed our opponent just checked back a flush on the turn and kind of just had to have it here as he had it last time. But now that I'm thinking about this hand, it doesn't really make much sense for our opponent to check back a flush on the turn, and it's not very likely they have a set. The only set they can have is really pocket 5s. With all of this said, we don't have a heart, which is not good, and people just don't bluff rivers, so we end up folding, but I really could go either way here. In one of the last hands of the night, we have pocket queens, and we raise under the gun to $20. The hijack calls, and the button 3 bets to $90. This is a pretty new player and he seems pretty tight, so we just make the call. The hijack also calls. The flop comes 9-7-3. We check to the button who bets 110. With an overpair here, obviously we are not going anywhere. We make the call and the hijack folds. The turn is the 4 of spades. We check and this time the button checks back. The river is the jack of clubs. I think our opponent can still have jacks plus here, so we go ahead and check once again. This time they bet 175 into about 500. For this price, we are very happy and we quickly make the call. Our opponent shows pocket aces. This is really another cooler situation. We could have definitely lost a lot more, so glad we didn't. In the last hand of the night, we have Queen Jack of Hearts, and there is an under the gun straddle for $10. The under the gun 1 player raises to $35, and we just call in the small blind. It's not great to call out of position in the small blind with many hands. I would rather be 3-betting, but this is a new player. They seem pretty tight, so we just decided to call. The big blind and the straddle also call. The flop comes King 8 Deuce 2 hearts. We have a flush draw and we check and it checks through. The turn is the 7 of hearts. We get there with our flush. We are not going to slow play. We go ahead and bet $65 into about 140. Just the big blind makes the call. The river is the 8 of diamonds. There's about 270 in the pot and we go for value for 150. Our opponent makes the call. We show our hand and are the winner. Time to end on a good note and rack up. We were in this session for $2,600 total and cashed out for $1,875, which is about a $700 loss. The only hand we probably could have gotten away from was the king high flush. Otherwise, a couple coolers, you know, with a top 2 pair and then the queens versus the aces. So overall, not too disappointed in how much we lost considering our circumstances. But if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you thought, and thanks for watching.